What's up, everybody? I'm Leah B. Jackson here with professional gamer Greg Idra Fields.
Hey, Leah.
Hey, we're going to be showing you the best way to play Valla the Demon Hunter and Heroes of the Storm. Ready to play?
Let's go.
All right. All right, well, here we are in try mode with Valla the Demon Hunter. Tell us a little bit about her, and then let's go through her abilities.
Demon Hunter is one of the best sustained damage kind of carries in the game, and she's actually the hero that I've played the most throughout Heroes of the Storm. She's a really fantastic damage dealer, but she also has a good amount of mobility and self-preservation. She's probably the closest to a traditional carry if you're more comfortable with League of Legends. She plays very similar to Vayne. So if you're looking for a carry type, this is about as close as you're going to get in this game. She can keep herself alive. She can also deal a lot of sustained damage. She's not like an assassin where she wants to get in and out. Her passive is called Hatred. She gains 1 stack of hatred for every basic attack she does, and at 8 stacks she gets a state called Enraged, where she gains additional attack damage and attack speed, which is a pretty decent buff to her DPS. It's not as noticeable as it sounds given the numbers, but it doesn't really matter. She's really strong either way. It's just a bit of a buff to her DPS. Her active abilities, her Q is called Hungering Arrow, and that just shoots an arrow. It is a skill shot, but it kind of seeks out the enemy, so it's not super hard to hit. And then it bounces 2 to 3 times depending on your talents. Does a bit of damage, and that's about it, so it's just a little bit of additional DPS. Her W ability is called Multi-Shot, and it just shoots a cone of arrows, doing damage to everything in the AoE. And it goes through heroes, so it doesn't really matter if there's line of sight or not. You can cast that on it, and it just does damage to everything, as we can see. Hit the ranged minions as well. So that's great for pushing. It's great for AoE damage against the team. It's just really a good general damage skill. Your E is called Vault, and that is your mobility spell. That's what you usually use to escape. You can use it to chase or to secure kills, but generally you're going to want to hold that to escape. And you can see it's a pretty long range. It gives you a lot of mobility. Why didn't that work? Okay, well that's not working, so we can't see it again, but it's a pretty decent range. So you just be attacking, and as soon as they come close, you just E away, and you're completely safe. And there's a bunch of talents you can get to add additional slow measures to that we'll look at in a second here. The ultimate that we're going to be looking at for this guide is Reign of Vengeance, and that's a pretty tight AoE, so it really helps if you have a setup, particularly like ETC's Mosh Pit, to help you land this. But if you cast it, and it's just 2 instances, and it does a mini-stun and a good amount of damage both times. And there's nothing super special about it, besides the mini-stun can be used to block channeling abilities, but it does a ton of damage, great AoE, just good team fight spell in general.
All right, sweet. Well, now here we are in Valla's talent section. How do you think we should spec her to sort of make the most of her?
There's 2 main ways to play Demon Hunter, as there are for quite a few heroes. You can focus either more on her abilities, like the arrow and the multi-shot, and tumble as well. And that'll give you pretty decent mobility and sustained damage, but really it's just not as effective as building her as a strong right-clicker, a strong auto-attack focused hero. So that's what I would recommend. For the first level, I generally get Path of the Assassin. You have 2 things that also buff your passive. Punishment is if you're going for a more like spellcaster kind of build, but the big problem with that is just you don't have mana for it, so again I wouldn't really recommend that. Rancor is kind of worth taking. It increases the duration of Enraged by 2 seconds, and it only starts out at like 5 or 6 seconds I believe, so it's a decent percentage increase, but again it's just really not as noticeable because you're moving around a lot, so your sustained DPS you don't really take advantage of it, so it's not that big of a deal. And Path of the Assassin is a big buff to her auto attack damage because it's not as high as like an Illidan or a Zeratul, so plus 50 at level 25 is a big percentage increase for her. So recommend going with that. As I said, she is a sustained damage dealer, so for level 4, absolutely get Vampiric Assault. Unless you have a ton of healers on your team, you can kind of consider Manticore. It buffs your DPS a little bit, but generally speaking, Vampiric Assault's the way to go. Lifesteal is just absolutely designed for sustained damage dealers like her. Level 7, you have a couple of different options. Arsenal adds some grenades to your multi-shot, which is a little bit of extra damage. It's not really that big of a deal. Generally wouldn't consider getting that one, although a lot of people do. I think Caltrops is the better option here. What it does is it drops 3 little landmine type things in a line when you tumble away from someone, and this causes a slow and as well as a dismount. It does enough damage to cause someone to dismount, so it makes it very, very hard to catch you and chase you down. So that's great. Searing attacks, additional DPS is always nice, but again, she has pretty limited mana pool, and her spells are very important, so you can't really afford the mana investment to actually get that damage bonus. For her heroic, as I said, we're going to be looking for Reign of Vengeance. Strafe is kind of okay, a lot of people get it, but really it's just not that great. compared to Rain of Vengeance. They're both decent. Neither is game-breaking. Neither is terrible. But definitely Rain of Vengeance, it gives you that stun, that lockdown, which is always nice. Preventing channeling is always good. And is pretty decent damage. Once you get up to the level 20 buff, at level 25, I believe it does something like 2,000 plus DPS, or 2,000 plus damage, if all 4 waves actually hit. So that's very, very noticeable if you actually have any kind of setup to land it. At level 13, as always, Giant Killer is available there, and as always on any right-clicker, that's always a fantastic ability to get. I believe at this level, you should either get Frost Shot or Giant Killer. Giant Killer is much better, as always, against the tankier heroes. If you're playing against the Stitches, you're having trouble killing him, that's going to be a big, big increase to your DPS against those specific heroes. Multi-Shot is great for chasing, and you are very well designed for chasing. You have your tumble ability, you're pretty fast, you deal good damage over time. So that can synergize very well. It is a 40% AoE slow, which is not to be underrated at all. So if your opponent, if the opposing team is very squishy, or they don't have any big tanks where Giant Killer would really kick in that well, Frost Shot is definitely a viable alternative. Repeating Arrow is usually the go-to at this level for the Spellcaster kind of Valla build, but again, without mana, that's not really going to be too great. It is a cool ability, and if she ever gets a buff to that mana pool, to that spellcasting side of her, that's definitely something to look at. It's actually a lot of fun to play. I really wish it were more viable, but really just you struggle to execute it. And speaking of Executioner at level 16, again, tooltips bugged, so 50% bonus damage against anyone who is disabled, which is massive, massive considering her DPS. But the problem is there's also 2 other fantastic abilities at this level. Tumble gives you a second charge to your Vault ability, your Escape, which means that it gives you a lot of extra utility because you no longer have to hold on to it purely to escape any kind of danger. You can actually even tumble in, set up a good angle for your Rain of Vengeance, get that on a lot of heroes, and then still have another vault left to get out if you happen to be in danger. And then also at this tier is Blood for Blood, which is just a fantastic ability in general. It gives you some survivability because you can steal 15% of your target's health, which can be, if you steal from the Stitches, that basically gives you another HP bar. Plus takes a lot of damage away, or a lot of HP away from him. And of course the slow is great for catching, chasing down, killing people. So there's 3 really, really strong abilities here. Generally I will get Tumble. It seems like you're passing up on a lot to give out on Blood for Blood or Executioner, but that mobility is very, very helpful. You are quite squishy, and it is very important for you to stay alive. So I would recommend going with Tumble, even though it feels kind of bad giving up the other 2. At level 20, you have 2 main options. Storm of Vengeance, it takes your Rain of Vengeance, which is usually 2 instances of damage and stun, and it turns it into 4 instances. So if you have setup, if you're getting really good ultimates, this is absolutely fantastic. It just doubles your damage output, additional stuns. If you're playing with an ETC or a Gazlo or anyone who has a lot of sustained lockdown, just go for that and you'll kill people. It does a ton of damage. But Fury of the Storm, if you're having trouble landing that ultimate, if you don't have that set up, Fury of the Storm is your other go-to. It causes your basic attacks to bounce twice to nearby enemies for 50% damage. And just on top of her DPS, as we've talked about, that's just even more damage, more AoE, makes her a bit of a better team fighter as she's no longer purely single target. So, 2 big options there. Generally, the Storm of Vengeance is much more fun, but it can be pretty difficult to take advantage of. Fury of the Storm is the more reliable option.
So now that we have her set up, how does this all work in an actual game?
She's one of the most versatile damage dealers. She doesn't take a lot of time to come online. She's actually kind of a lane bully because she has a good bit of range, a lot of damage in both her auto attacks and her spells, and she always has that escape mechanism with her tumble, and she can also use that to secure kills. So she can even solo a lane if you want. She's great to gank with, because if she's in lane and you come in with any kind of lockdown, she can put a lot of damage on the target. So she's not like the other assassins we've looked at where they're kind of weak, kind of wimpy early on in the game. She's ready to go right out of the gate. And then once you come to team fights, the biggest thing is just remember, play her like an AD carry from League. You're sitting at the edge of the battle, you're hitting whoever comes in range, and you're running away from any kind of diving, lockdown, or initiator or whatnot. You are very, very squishy. You do need to stay away from people. You don't want to stand and trade with them. You just want to be fighting while your front line absorbs all the damage, and you're just putting out continuous high DPS from the edge of the battle, using your vault to stay away from any kind of danger, and using your spells on cooldown, but make sure you continue to auto-attack, and be very, very careful not to overcommit to certain targets. A lot of people will think, well, I have to go in and I have to kill their squishy support or the squishy damage dealer. She is not built for that. You do have the tumble ability that you can use that to chase after kills or set up angles, but you have to be very, very careful, because if you get caught, you die. So you have to always make sure you have an escape, or make sure that it is actually okay for you to go in.
Great. Well, now that we know how to play as Valla, how do you play against her?
As with most ranged damage dealers, if you can get to her, you can kill her. The problem is getting to her, because as we've talked about, she has a lot of escape, a lot of mobility, so you have to be careful about overcommitting. But the trade-off for that is her damage is not as high as a Nova. Like a Nova, if you get to her, you're going to kill her. She can't get away. But Demon Hunter can, but she also needs to be standing there shooting at you. So basically what you want to do is you want to send your Diablo or your Muradin or whoever your initiator is, send him in her face, make her burn her vault, make her get out of the fight, and then just go back. Don't chase her down. Don't worry about that. She's going to get away. You're not going to kill her very quickly. You're more useful in the fight. And if she comes back while her tumble is on cooldown, then you can actually go kill her, because then she has no escape. And if she waits long enough, then that's a long time where she's sitting there not doing any kind of damage. And that's really all you want. She's a damage dealer. She's not doing that. She's not serving any purpose for her team, and it's basically a 5-on-4. So just whenever she comes up, you scare her away, and then you go back to the fight. You wait for her to reapproach.
And there you have it, guys. But remember, this is our best way to play, and we want to hear yours in the comments.
Be sure to head over to Greg's Twitch channel for more pro tips, and for everything Heroes of the Storm, stay tuned to IGN.